Okay, so Paul Roselli, president of the Burrillville Land Trust and activist in many environmental groups, is going to talk about the Rhode Island Energy Facility Siting Act.
Hello, everyone. There you go. You're supposed to say hi, Paul.
Hi, Paul.
You know, in a way, I wish Jerry was here, but I'm going to give a plug for Jerry. So many of you know that over the last 4 years, many of us in this room have been fighting a power plant, a proposed power plant in the middle of the woods in the northwest corner of Rhode Island. And without the help of Conservation Law Foundation, particularly Jerry Elmer, that defeat of that proposed power plant would not take place. So even though he's not here, we all mentally, and next time you see him, give him a pat on the back, thank him so much, because without his efforts and the efforts of CLF, that power plant would already have been built. So I'm going to take you through this esoteric, convoluted approach and discussion of this thing called the Energy Facility Siting Act. And over the next half hour or so, we'll talk about a few things. And if you've got questions along the way, shout them out. If I don't recognize you, do the best, get my attention, jump up and down, do whatever you have to do. I'm going to go over a very brief history of what the EFSA is all about, the Energy Facility Siting Act. The Energy Facility Siting Act is a law on the books. It's been there since 1986. Anybody remember those years? No, right? So I'll go through that. I'll also talk about some of the definitions which helped put in place a proposed frack gas power plant in the middle of the woods of the northwest corner of Rhode Island. Since September of 2019, there's been a study group, a working group, to make the EFSA, bring it up to date, and more in line with our way of thinking today. Also update us as to some of the challenges associated with climate change, and also bring us more in line with what some of the other New England states are doing. And in the end, we'll talk about some of the other changes where I hope, at the end, I give everyone in this room not only the ammunition, but the hope that there actually is a possibility for the end of fossil fuel use for the production of electricity in the state of Rhode Island. I'm going to say that one more time. That at the end of this presentation, my desire is to give you hope that the end of fossil fuel use for the production of electricity is very near on the horizon. So my intention tonight is to give you a little bit of information about the existing law, to tell you about some of the proposed changes, to tell you about this working group that's been going on, to also go through some of what I think, as a result of the Invenergy project in the gas-fired power plant, what I think is an avenue, a road to the end of fossil fuel use in for the production of electricity in Rhode Island. The disclaimer is everything I know I learned from Jerry, and I learned from the Energy Facility Siting Board, and being steeped into this process for the last 4 years. As many of you know, the Burrillville Land Trust took on a leadership role way back in November of 2016 to try to make sure that everybody understood, February of 2016, to try to make sure that everybody in the state of Rhode Island understood the potential disastrous consequences of putting a frack gas power plant in the middle of the woods in the northwest corner of Rhode Island. So let's talk about the history of this Energy Facility Siting Act. A very, very brief history. It all started way back in 1986 when Rhode Island enacted these general laws called 42-98. And in summary, what the legislative body at that time discovered was that in 1986, the authority to approve or deny these power plants was in different parts of different state agencies. And there was a potential for a conflict of decisions. The legislative body way back in 1984 and 1985 and in 1986 decided that they must coordinate and expedite this review so that each state agency had some input and also to put one body, one group of people who had the authority to decide whether or not this power plant, whatever it was going to be approved or denied. Also within the legislative findings, they wanted to make sure that whatever was proposed was reasonably priced, was reliable, that the impact of public health and safety and the environment was minimal. Even way back in 1986, they thought about these things. And they also wanted to make sure that there was a study or some type of assessment for the long-term economic impact for the state. And they wanted to recognize and consider need. And that was probably the most important thing that took place in this current situation with the Invenergy project. But is the power plant needed? And in 1986, they put that into the legislation as well. Anybody remember 1986? These were some of the hot items way back then. Technology was unbelievable way back then. I started working at Brown University in 1986. I was the first one on campus to have one of these things. Anybody recognize what that is? A what? Apple IIe. You're absolutely right. It was the first decentralized computer. It wasn't hooked up to a mainframe. It appeared on my desk. I started using it, and the rest is history. And a lot of other things happened. I don't know if anybody knows what this guy, but that was the technology and what was going on in 1986. In 1986, this law said that there was going to be three people. One, the chairman of the Public Utilities Commission, the director. Second one, the director of the Department of Environmental Management. And third, the associate director of administration for planning. They were going to sit on this board, and they were decided who or what was going to be approved. Anybody know who appoints these three people? Well, the governor appoints them. The only one who has a term of office is the chairman of the Public Utilities Commission. And still today, although her term is up, Meg Curran is still up there slugging away, trying to decide. But these other two sit at the pleasure of the governor. So even though all three are appointed, two have sit there at the pleasure of the governor and can give up their seat to somebody else rather quickly. And one of them, the VP Public Utilities Commission, has a set term of office, which is 6 years. The key part of this is something called major energy facility. And for the state of Rhode Island, what they determined way back in 1986 as a major energy facility was anything over 40 megawatts or more of produced electricity. So if the production facility was producing 40 megawatts or more, it was considered a major energy facility subject to EFSA regulation. Had to go before these three people. Had to go before them. And there was an adjudication process. There was a public hearing. There was very much like a courtroom setting. But if it's 40 megawatts or more, they had to go before the EFSB. And I don't think anybody in this room would argue that that's a major energy facility, major energy production facility. Would anybody argue that this is not a major energy production facility? This is the Invenergy power plant. It was producing close to a little over 900 megawatts of electricity. But the Energy Facility Siting Board not only looks at things like this, but a whole bunch of other things as well. They look at things like extraction, transmission lines at a certain kilovolt, hydroelectric generators. We have a few in Rhode Island, mostly up north of here. But we do have those things. All of those, if there were new ones, all had to go before, at least in terms of the 1986 law, had to go before the Energy Facility Siting Board. Also things like transfer of oil, coal and gas pipelines, and anything that the EFSB, the Energy Facility Siting Board, determined to be a major energy facility had to go before the EFSB. But the bulk of dockets, the bulk of the work of the Energy Facility Siting Board is transmission lines. If you went on the website today and you looked at some of these, what they call dockets, you'll see SB, which means siting board. You'll see the year that it was first put in. You'll see what number it is. It could be the same, the same street. Could be just a different docket number. Most of these are transmission lines. It is very rare. It's rare for the EFSB to get a major energy facility, production facility that's 40 megawatts or more. Anybody remember what the first one was, way back in 1990 or so? It was Ocean State Power, also in Burrillville, also at the time something that was, in their case, it was using diesel fuel, number 2 diesel fuel, and getting water from the Blackstone River. So that's what the Energy Facility Siting Board is capable of doing. Over the years, there have been lots of attempts at changing the law, mostly to update it, because we're really way behind our neighbors to the left, Connecticut, and our neighbors to the north and east in Massachusetts have more board members, a more robust transparency process. They get input from a variety of sources, and they have more members on the board. Connecticut can go up to 30 members. In Massachusetts, it can hover around 14 or 16 members on this board, which decides whether or not a power plant of a certain megawatt is going to be permitted and cited in those 2 states. Ours has only 3, and 2 of those are appointed, all 3 are appointed. Of all of those changes over the last 10 years or so, most of them were trying to catch up with the other New England states. Places like New Hampshire and Maine have better siting councils and siting boards, and I mean better in terms of more robust, more members, more transparency, more information than we do here in Rhode Island. Of all of those attempts over the years, many have died in committee. None made it through both chambers of the legislature, and none of them made it before in front of the governor for at the time for her signature. So it's been a really rough ride, and over these last 4 years, all of those attempts were to make changes to that Energy Facility Siting Board in Rhode Island. Since September of 2019, there have been a working group. These are the folks who are appointed. You can see a list of names here. And I hope you see at the very, very bottom, I was the last one to be invited to the board. Not quite sure why, because I think many members up there already would have been able to fulfill some of the issues and requirements and some of the challenges that I would bring to that working group, but there they are. During a typical meeting, this is the one that occurred January 10th. We had one yesterday, or was it today? I can't remember. The days are kind of just like, oh, we had one very soon. I think it was today, I'm sorry. We had one today. I didn't get the attendance sheet, so I can't tell you who was there officially. But you can see on the last one that we had an official attendance sheet. These are usually the people who show up, people from DEM, Department of Administration, National Grid, Tech RI, a labor union or 2 every once in a while, Jerry Elmer or somebody from CLF. And the idea is to review and change the legislation. That's the idea. The idea since September of 2019 was to get people in the room and talk about this thing so we can have some honest legislation that would get before the House of the Senate and actually get passed. Heavy lift, a really heavy lift, I think. What are the changes over these last several months? Well, most of the changes that you see up here were proposed by the Burrillville Land Trust. I'm going to point you to a few of them. This is the one we proposed early on, that the FSD would no longer accept applications for the production of electricity using fossil fuels. That's a really nice one, right?
Yeah.
Wouldn't you like that one? I thought that was a great idea. What are the chances of that going through? Anybody? There you go. You got it.
Zero.
Yeah, almost very well. However, there is a glimmer of hope. The idea was to put the Resilient Rhode Island Act of 2014 would be included. That apparently has been included in the working group and successfully argued by Jerry Elmer and a few others within the group. So that appears to be going through. The idea of applicants applying with applications that are more like municipal planning documents with details and site details and some engineering studies. That seemed to be something that everybody wanted. One of the things that we're trying to get through over the next several weeks before the deadline, we'll talk about that in a second, is that this Science and Technical Advisory Committee that came out of the Resilient Rhode Island Act would be one of the agencies to review the application. That I think is very significant. And we wanted to get some of the changes proposed by the Land Trust were to get closer to other New England states, increase the board size, get a public council, get some money available for some nonprofits or some grassroots organizations like Carrie to do some internal research, to make a presentation, put together a white paper, to get it out. Some of these changes have made their way through, and some have gotten sidelined since September. The one that I hop on all the time, just about every meeting, is that the EFSD would reject any application that had to do with fossil fuel use for the production of electricity in Rhode Island. And I say that because that, to me, is the key. That's it. If we can get that one in there, or some semblance of that, like the Resilient Rhode Island Act, like the mandatory reductions, like STAB, the Science and Technical Advisory Board, reviewing all these applications. If we can get something like that in there, then we have a chance of cutting out almost 18% of our greenhouse gas emissions that are caused by fossil fuel use in the production of electricity in the state of Rhode Island. Jerry Elmer said it absolutely correct. He said, without people like you, without Carrie, without Civic Alliance for a Cooler Rhode Island, without a host of other organizations all over Rhode Island, without you getting involved, we can't get that in there. However, there was a gift that was given not too long ago in November of last year. It was a gift by the Energy Facility Siting Board in this thing called EFSD Order 140. Does anybody remember what that's about? What was that about? That was the written denial for Invenergy to site and permit a power plant in the northwest woods of Rhode Island. It was their written order, as they're required to do by law. And all of us in the room just got a gift. Because here's what they said, and this is so important. I want you to memorize this and look at the order and stick it in the back of your head whenever anybody says, we don't have any state agency ever said, no state agency ever said we have to eliminate fossil fuel use for the production of electricity. That is absolutely wrong. Here's why. In their order, they did some amazing things. If you did a keyword search on words like transformation in the order, they'll point to this thing called Energy 2035. And in Energy 2035, this is a state of Rhode Island statewide planning document, officially accepted by the state of Rhode Island. And in that document, Invenergy, which is the Chicago-based company which proposed the power plant, used Energy 2035 to bolster their argument that a gas-fired power plant is needed. The EFSD didn't buy it. They gave everybody in this room a giant gift. Here's what they said. They said that the kind of transformation that the energy plan contemplates just doesn't endorse the Invenergy project. Pretty cool, huh? Invenergy was using Energy 2035 as an argument for. EFSA came back and said, oh, not exactly. Matter of fact, absent the retirement of some currently operating large gas-fired power plants, the addition of Invenergy proposed plant would greatly increase the generation of the energy plan proposes to decrease. Pretty cool, huh? Here's what else they said. That the proposed plant would be consistent. That was Invenergy's claim. Have I lost anybody yet? Are we all on the same page?
Yeah.
Fabulous. If not, yell it out. I don't know what the hell you're talking about. Say something. Is it consistent with the state guide plan as the Act requires? They came back and the EFSA came back and said adding a new gas plant, even a fast start one, the most advanced thing that better than sliced bread, came back and said, sorry, there we go. There we go. Does not advance the stated goals. Pretty neat. Again, when you're talking with legislators, and legislators say, no, no state agency ever said any of that stuff. You tell them, absolutely not. Matter of fact, they did. And they said it over and over again in this Order 24. Matter of fact, they said it would perpetuate the status quo. That's money in the bank. That's the one thing you can use in your argument against anybody who says that fossil, the Lynette's of the world who say it would be catastrophic, would perpetuate the status quo. And one more, and I'm almost done, by the way, so if you've got questions, we'll do this. The energy plan emphasizes the need for a balanced approach. Absolutely, setting the state on a long-term path towards energy system transformation. And what else did they say? Fossil fuel power plants do not figure prominently in that transformation. Cool stuff, right? The EFSB, either intentionally, or maybe unintentionally, or maybe just by law, or maybe somewhere in the middle, set Rhode Island on a path towards the complete elimination of fossil fuels for the production of electricity. You should be jumping up and down in your seats. They put, let me say that again, they put Rhode Island on the path for the elimination of fossil fuels for the production of electricity in the state of Rhode Island. So, the intent here was to talk about the EFSB. There's a working group coming up. Hopefully by next week, or the week after, there'll be a new piece of legislation to update the current Energy Facility Siting Act. And once that happens, I'll give Carrie some bill numbers, and we'll do a little cheat sheet, like Jerry did on some of the Resilient Rhode Island 2.0 bills in the House and the Senate. But the takeaway for you tonight is that last statement from the Energy Facility Siting Board. So there is hope. Any questions? Peter.
Following question for you. Roughly speaking, electricity production is 30% of our fossil fuel use.
Just so you know, DEM characterizes it between 16 and 18%. For greenhouse gases. I know I'm not,
No,
I know you're not there.
I said 30%, so we seem to disagree. Let me stick with my numbers, maybe they're wrong, but typically across the nation, 30% goes into, is used for electricity. There are embodied emissions, which is emissions that are taking place in China or on the way from China to here. If you take all, or wherever it is, if you take all that into account, about half of what we benefit from is an embodied emission. So if you say we got rid of electricity, I'm very happy, I don't disagree with you at all, but we have to keep in mind that it's 15% of the emissions that basically we benefit from. So my question is, should we or should we not feel responsibility for emissions that we benefit from, whether they're in-state or out-state or elsewhere in Peru or China or wherever?
Yeah, so
And if we are responsible for that,
yeah,
what
so
are we
if you're
doing to deal with that?
Right, so if you're asking my opinion as a vegan, as someone who mirrors my lifestyle with the health and safety of the planet and all of that, the short answer is yes.
What are we doing for that?
So bills like this are the tip of the ice. If everyone took on their own bill and took around, we'd make a bigger impact. What can Rhode Island do? Let's be honest, probably not much. But we can be a model for a whole bunch of other states and organizations as well. Yes?
How on board is National Grid in transitioning off of fossil fuels?
Yeah, so we've got to remember what National Grid is all about. And National Grid is primarily on transmission, whether it be transmission of electrons, transmission of gas. They don't produce a single electron. They handle wires, substations, underground pipes, and other stuff. But they don't own a power plant, at least not in New England. Is that right? Yes. That's
But they'll buy like gas-powered electricity, they'll buy like...
right. They buy it, but they won't produce it. So how on board are they with end of fossil fuel use for the production of electricity? I don't know. That has not come up within the deliberations of the group. We made for good or for bad, we made a clear distinction between the production side and the transmission side when it came to working out this bill, because we knew if we included National Grid in any form of the production side, that would be the end of the discussions. Steve.
I have a quick question. The EFSB is going to be considering soon eliminating their oversight of temporary natural gas facilities. They're doing it for Aquidneck Island right now because of the emergency there, but the National Grid has asked for that to be statewide and forever. Is there anything in this bill that might address that, like preemptively prevent that from happening?
There may be inadvertently. So it's not. So one of the things we've been talking about, which drew a lot of attention, as you would imagine, is the transmission of fossil fuels. So LNG tanks, pipelines, methane leaks. How much responsibility does National Grid have? The discussion is ongoing. I can tell you that today, there was a meeting today, that today the idea of a storage tank came up, and it was not scoffed at by National Grid. So can the EFSB regulate storage tanks for some energy, something, heating, electricity, battery storage, so the fossil fuel side and the battery storage side. There's been a lively discussion about that number 40. Where did 40 come from? I don't know. I don't know. I'm trying to find out, looking at the historical register through the archives of the state of Rhode Island. But you can imagine that any solar production company, solar array, wants to make sure that that number is below 40, whatever they're producing for electricity. Because if it's 40 or above, they have to go before the Energy Facility Siting Board. So not to disparage anybody, but the North Smithfield 400-acre solar array was initially 45 megawatts, and they reworked the numbers, so now it's 38.4 megawatts. So now it's not going to go before the Energy Facility Siting Board.
To that point, I just noticed, so the advisory, National Grid, the only, like, our representatives from National Grid, the only people from private corporations that are on that board.
Yeah, so one of the challenges initially, and again, I was invited last, there are actually a lot of production producers and corporations, private entities on that list of 62 people.
Yeah, because you know, I don't know all the people that's on
Right.
that schedule.
So who shows up are the, unfortunately or fortunately, the 12 or 14 who show up. National Grid is there religiously, Tech RI, one of the labor unions, one of the construction unions is usually there. CLF is there. And then a lot of the state agencies, the Attorney General's Office, Common Administration, OER, DEM, DOH, so comes, visits occasionally, and some of the other state agencies come. But as of the last 3 or 4 meetings, maybe more, 4 meetings, out of the last 4 meetings, National Grid has been the only private entity there.
Okay, I would just, if we could talk about it, I'd like to just learn more about the board.
Yeah.
Thank you.
That's in the study, okay, just so we're clear. Another question?
I think we should thank our speaker and
Great. Thank you so much.